Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to another exciting episode of The Writing Lair. For those of you who are just discovering me through this video, my name is Brady Longmore. I am an independently published author. I've published 4 novels up to this point, and this channel, this is my the early stages and the beginning of my foray into the YouTube world. So if you're just joining me and you like writing and books and reading and the occasional scary, chilling ghost story, then you've come to the right place, I guess. And you ought to click the like button and subscribe. What I like to do is I do like to discuss writing, writing tips, anything about writing, reading, anything that comes to my mind. I haven't quite boxed myself into exactly what this channel is about yet, but so far, writing tips and writing techniques. I like to answer questions that I've been asked by people. I should say I do my genres that I write and read in are fantasy and horror. I like anything to do with mysteries, legends, Bigfoot and ghosts and aliens and just good old-fashioned scary stories. So once in a while, you can check out some of my other videos before this. I have done a couple scary stories, a couple true ghost stories. So anyway, if you're just finding me, you're welcome. Appreciate that you're here. And again, click like, click subscribe, and help me build this little channel up. Okay, so with all that, saying all that, let's go ahead and let's get started on today's topic. Okay, so today I wanted to talk a little bit about and focus on writing. I get asked all the time, well, I wish it was more often, but I get asked once in a while questions about writing. There's a lot of people out there that are curious, and I don't know if it's because they want to write or they want to get into writing and publishing and stuff like that, or they're just genuinely curious. So I thought I'd answer one of the questions, one of the things I've been asked. And so today's topic, and whatever else comes into my mind at the time, but today's topic, I'd like to talk about discovery writing and plotting. So there's 2 types of writers, and I'll just get right into it. There's 2 types of writers out there. They're generally categorized into 2 categories. Discovery writers, or pantsers they're called, and pantsers is short for flying by the seat of your pants, and plotters or outliners. I think of them as outliners. So the difference is your discovery writers are well, let me talk about outliners first. So your outliners are before they write a book, and I have some author friends who are very much outliners, and let me also start and say there's no wrong way. One way isn't better than the other. You have to find what works for you. So anyway, an outliner is someone who comes up with the idea, okay, and they come up with the idea for a story, and they start outlining it in a notebook or on a computer, but they go scene after scene, chapter by chapter, and they have basically their whole story outlined from beginning, middle to end, how the story's going to go. And a lot of them are very meticulous. They've got index cards with scenes on them, and they really get all their ducks in a row. Okay, they get everything figured out before they even start to write their manuscript. And then once it's all once they have their ducks in a row and they've got a big binder or a notebook or a computer file to guide them, it's like blah, 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 and they just write it all out real quick. It's a very effective way to write, and it's highly recommended. I wish. It sounds great. Sounds great. Unfortunately for me, I am part of that other group known as discovery writers. So that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more because I have experience with it. Like I said, I have published 4 novels now, over 600,000 words in publication at this point. I'm not an expert, but I've bushwhacked my way around in the writing world a little bit now. So I feel like, maybe I can talk about it. And so for those of you who are curious, let me tell you a little bit, discovery writing, a little bit about it. So discovery writing is basically making it up as you go. You have a vague idea. So this is speaking from my own experience. For everyone, it might be a little different, but you start out with kind of a vague idea. You have this idea that's maybe been germinating in your imagination for a while. You have a few scenes maybe in your head that you think would be cool, but you have no idea how they connect. And you're sit down at your computer and you just start writing. You don't know where you're going. You're not quite sure how it's going to end. You're not quite sure what characters are going to be in the book. And I'll give you an example how wild it can be. My first book, my first novel, The Summoning, was pure pantsing. It was just 100% flying by the seat of my pants and going as I went. And it's crazy because I first thought, those of you who've read it, it's a horror novel. Those of you who haven't, it's a horror novel. And it's a kind of like a Mayberry town has a serial killer, and he's possessed by a demon helping him. Anyway, that's the gist of it. Anyway, when I started writing The Summoning, I had this idea of a teenage boy who was troubled and starts getting into the occult, starts having demonic experiences. And I had it in my head that these these two brothers that would be like, maybe like 10 and 14 years old, 2 brothers on their neighboring farm. And it takes place in the 1940s, right after World War II. So these 2 neighboring boys would see things going on the neighboring farm, things going wrong, ghosts wandering through the woods and stuff like that. And it was going to be this really scary, creepy story with these boys trying to figure it out and solve mystery and all that. So I started writing it. In the first couple of chapters has the villain, the protagonist, or the antagonist, and how he starts going down the dark path. And I decided, I think it's chapter, I don't even have a copy of it with me right here, but somewhere like maybe chapter 3, chapter 2, I decided I needed a town sheriff as a main character. Not even a main character. He's going to be a side character, but these boys needed a sheriff they could call. So I started just writing the scene. I had no idea where I was going with it. I just thought this sheriff, a small town kind of Andy Griffith sheriff's going to get a phone call that a kid's gone missing. That's all I knew. I start writing the scene. I start describing this sheriff, and ideas are coming into my head. And by the end of the chapter, suddenly this sheriff has become my main character. The 2 boys, they're in the book, but they don't hardly take up any page space at all. By the end of this chapter, all of a sudden I had a different main character. And because all of a sudden I'm writing this guy, and I just fell in love with his background, his personality. I'm just making this stuff up on the fly. All of a sudden he's a returned war hero that was a Marine that fought in the Pacific, and he's the most eligible bachelor in town, and he's this kind of heroic figure that has a haunted past, and then, like a chapter later, or by the end of that chapter, out of the blue comes this girl that's from out of town who's pretty, and he starts having a little crush on her, and she's helping him, and all of a sudden I have a romance. Now, none of that was planned. Not a bit of it, especially the romance part. I never would have in my wildest dreams set out to write anything romantic, because I wouldn't have imagined that would be in me, but it just came out. So, kind of a long example there, but that's an example of how discovery writing worked in my case. Now, the problems and your main issues with discovery writing is you have to watch yourself, because, well, and you can't even control this, but you will go off on tangents. You're going down your main path, and you'll split off on these little tangents, and you'll hit a dead end, and you've got to backtrack and delete scenes and chapters and go back and change things, or it's kind of a mess. You get done writing your first draft, and it's a little bit of a mess with tangents and characters doing things out of character, characters that shouldn't be in there at all. So there's a lot of cleanup and a lot of trimming and rewriting and stuff like that goes on for discovery writers. And discovery writers tend to write a lot more than they should have. So there's a lot of cutting and trimming. But the good news is, the great thing about discovery writers is you are in great company. George R.R. Martin, from the guy who wrote Game of Thrones, he's a discovery writer. Stephen King is a discovery writer. So, it's not like I wouldn't say that they don't know what they're doing. So it is a legitimate way to write, but just keep in mind you're probably putting a lot more work on yourself. I think of it as you paint yourself into a corner sometimes, and you got to figure out how to get yourself out. So that's probably the downside. But one of the pluses to discovery writing, something I've learned by researching it and stuff, is discovery writers tend to be create very strong, very believable characters. And I know that's what happens to me, is my characters come alive, because that's just part of the process. I'm just really, I'm really mining these characters and what they think and what they feel. And so for me, I end up creating these great characters, and as long as I don't screw it up, the story should be good. If you have good characters and realistic, believable characters, and you can make the reader sympathize with those characters, then it's hard to go wrong. I mean, not everything you write is going to be out of the park, but you will have solid stuff. Plotters, your outliners, they have the opposite problem. A lot of times their plot is great. There's no plot holes, no mistakes. They have theme and a plot and solid characters, but that's where they kind of tend to fall apart. Is there's a lot of something gets lost along the way for plotters. They tend to kind of lose that, I don't know what to call it, just kind of the magic, because it's all been written down. And so, and I'm not saying outliners don't write good stories. They do. I'm talking about first draft. They have to be careful. They have to look at their characters and make sure they're not creating two-dimensional characters that the reader's not going to care about. Because in the end, you can have an awesome story, setting, imaginative landscapes and magic and stuff, but if your characters aren't great and the reader doesn't care about your characters, then the story just isn't going to be very good. The reverse of that is you can have kind of a mediocre landscape, mediocre setting, but if the characters are well written and sympathetic, then the readers are going to like your story, usually. So, disadvantages, there's pros and cons. My advice is to not be one or the other, but try to adopt a little bit of the other way, so that you're not rigidly in this box that you can't get out of. So The Summoning, my first novel, was pure discovery writing, and I got lucky. I in my mind, I got lucky because it turned out really good. I get great reviews. People really like it. My next book was a trilogy, so it was big. It's 400,000 word trilogy. I had no choice but to start taking notes and start plotting ahead a little bit. Okay, where am I going with this? What's going to happen down the road? If I do this, how's it going to affect this? You know, I don't know if you can see me. My hands out. So I was forced to start outlining a little bit. It's all up here, but I started getting out paper and just kind of trying to make sure I'm on track. And so I've been trying to kind of teach myself a little bit about outlining and the advantages of it. And I'm glad I did, because I think it's making less work for me in the end, and it's not detracting too much from that passion that goes into writing. Because one of the things that most discovery writers will tell you is if they try to outline, and I'll tell you this from experience, because after The Summoning, I went to write another horror novel, and I outlined it. Just I was like, okay, I'm going to be an outliner. I'm going to outline this time, because that's the way to do it. And after I'd outlined this story, I had no passion for it. It's like the need to tell the story was gone. And I wrote about 10,000 words, and I just quit. I walked away from it and wrote a completely different story. It didn't work for me. I have to have that discovery process while I'm writing. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you're the same way, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's just some of the differences. I think the video is probably getting a little long now. So I just wanted to drop another video since it's been a couple of weeks, and it'd been a while since I discussed actual writing techniques, writing tips. So for those of you who've been kind of asking those kinds of questions, here you go. And I plan to continue to do more of this. And if you have any questions or comments about the writing process, my process, what goes into my writing, feel free to drop a comment in the comments section, and maybe I'll make a whole video about your questions. So as you can see, once I get going, I am hard to stop with the talkie. So anyway, again, let me remind you, please like and subscribe this video. Help me build this channel up and make it something worthwhile and worth doing. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for today, guys. Tonight, it's actually night. I'm getting ready. As soon as I'm done recording this video, I'm going to start writing, and I'm putting in an all-nighter tonight. So got the Mountain Dew ready, and I'm good to go. Anyway, we'll see you next time, people. We'll see you on the web, and appreciate all the comments and likes and all the support out there. I really appreciate it. And until we see each other again, I wish you all happy reading.